It was 1:55 in the morning. The music was loud. The lights flashed across a crowded college bar. Students laughed. Friends celebrated. Bartenders rushed from one order to another. For everyone inside, me, it felt like a normal Friday night. Nobody noticed anything unusual. Nobody sensed danger. Me, nobody imagined they were witnessing the final moments of a man who would become one of America's greatest unsolved mysteries. Because somewhere inside that crowd stood a 27-year-old medical student named Brian Shaffer. A young man with dreams, a future, a family who loved him, and within a matter of minutes, he would disappear. Not die, not run away, not leave behind a note, not make a final phone call, not use a credit card, not access a bank account, not contact a single friend. He would simply vanish. Me. Years later, investigators would still be asking the same question. How can a grown man walk into a crowded building filled with cameras and never come back out? Tonight, we are opening one of the strangest missing person cases ever recorded. A mystery that has frustrated detectives for nearly 2 decades. A mystery with no body, no suspects, no answers, me. And perhaps no ending. Stay with me until the very end, because the final theory may completely change the way you see this case. Welcome to the Midnight Archive, where forgotten mysteries, chilling disappearances, and dark secrets are brought back into the light. Turn down the lights, put on your headphones, and step into the mystery. Brian Randall Shaffer was born on February 25, 1979, in Ohio. From an early age, he stood out. He was intelligent, friendly, confident, the kind of person people naturally liked. Friends described him as funny and charismatic. Someone who could make people laugh without trying too hard. Someone who felt comfortable in almost any situation. As he grew older, Brian focused on his education. He worked hard. He dreamed big. Eventually, he enrolled in medical school. Becoming a doctor wasn't just a career choice. It was his goal, his future, the path he had spent years building. Medical school is not easy. The pressure is constant. Long nights become normal. Stress becomes part of daily life. Yet Brian seemed determined to succeed. To the people around him, everything appeared to be moving in the right direction. But life can change quickly. Only weeks before his disappearance, Brian suffered a devastating loss. His mother passed away after battling cancer. The tragedy hit the family hard. Losing a parent changes a person, even when they appear strong on the outside. Friends later said Brian was struggling with grief, not in a dramatic way, not in a way that alarmed people, but the loss affected him deeply. Still, he continued moving forward. He continued attending school, he continued making plans, and he continued looking toward the future. No one close to him believed he wanted to disappear. No one believed he was planning to abandon everything. In fact, just before he vanished, Brian had discussed future vacations, future goals, future opportunities. Nothing suggested that he was preparing to leave his life behind. Then came March 31st, 2006, a Friday, the kind of day that seemed completely ordinary. Nobody knew that by sunrise the next morning, Brian would be gone. That evening, Brian met with friends. The group planned to enjoy a night out in Columbus, Ohio. The atmosphere was relaxed. People were looking forward to the weekend. Bars and restaurants were packed. Music echoed through the city streets. Everything felt normal. Brian spent part of the evening with his friend William Florence. The two eventually met another friend named Clint Florence. As the night progressed, they moved between locations and enjoyed themselves. Nothing unusual happened. Nobody reported strange behavior. Nobody described Brian as upset. Nobody noticed anything alarming. By all accounts, he appeared completely normal. As midnight approached, the group headed toward a popular bar called the Ugly Tuna Saloona. The bar sat inside a commercial entertainment complex known as South Campus Gateway. It was a well-known location, especially among students. On busy nights, the place was packed. Hundreds of people could pass through the area. The atmosphere was loud and energetic. Exactly the type of place where people expected to have fun. Security cameras monitored portions of the building. Employees worked throughout the night. Customers came and went constantly. At approximately 1:15 a.m., surveillance footage captured Brian entering the area. The footage was clear. Investigators would later review it countless times. There was no confusion, no uncertainty. Brian entered the complex. He was there. The cameras proved it. Inside the bar, Brian spent time socializing. At one point, he was seen speaking with two women. The interaction appeared casual. The women later told investigators that nothing seemed unusual. Brian wasn't acting frightened. He wasn't arguing with anyone. He wasn't trying to leave suddenly. Everything appeared perfectly normal. The conversation lasted only a short time. Then everyone went their separate ways. At the time, nobody realized those women would become some of the last people known to have spoken with Brian. As closing time approached, customers began leaving. Employees prepared to end their shifts. The energy of the night slowly faded. People started heading home, and somewhere during those final moments, Brian Shaffer disappeared. The first signs of trouble appeared when friends could no longer locate him. Initially, nobody panicked. A crowded bar isn't unusual. People often become separated. Friends assumed Brian had left. Perhaps he found another ride home. Perhaps he met someone. Perhaps he simply walked away without telling anyone. It seemed like a simple misunderstanding. But hours passed. Then the entire night passed. And Brian never appeared. Calls went unanswered. Messages received no response. His family became concerned. Friends grew worried. Something wasn't right. The following day, concern turned into alarm. This wasn't normal behavior. Brian wasn't known for disappearing without explanation. He had obligations, responsibilities, people waiting to hear from him, yet nobody could find him. Soon, police became involved. Investigators began searching for answers. The first step seemed obvious. Review the security footage. If Brian entered the bar, cameras would show him leaving. The mystery would be solved. At least, that's what everyone expected. Detectives collected footage from the area. They reviewed the recordings carefully. Then they reviewed them again and again. What they discovered would shock everyone involved. The cameras clearly showed Brian entering the complex. There was no doubt about that. But investigators could not find footage showing him leaving. Not through the main entrance. Not through the escalator. Not through the areas covered by surveillance cameras. It was as though Brian entered the building and vanished into thin air. At first, detectives suspected a mistake. Perhaps they missed something. Perhaps another camera angle would reveal the answer. But the more they looked, the stranger the situation became. Hours of footage were examined. Every possible movement was analyzed. Yet Brian never appeared leaving through the routes investigators expected. News of the case spread quickly. Kill me. The public became fascinated. How could someone disappear from a crowded location without being seen? How could surveillance cameras capture a person entering but not exiting? The questions seemed impossible, and the deeper investigators looked, the more complicated the mystery became. Detectives soon learned there were additional exits connected to service areas, construction zones, employee pathways, routes not fully covered by cameras. The discovery offered a possible explanation. Maybe Brian used one of those exits. Maybe he simply avoided the cameras. But that answer created another problem. If Brian left through an unmonitored exit, where did he go afterward? No nearby cameras captured him. No witnesses reported seeing him. No evidence placed him anywhere after that night. It was as if the world simply stopped recording his existence. The investigation expanded rapidly. Friends were interviewed. Family members were questioned. Employees were contacted. Potential witnesses were identified. Police examined every detail they could find. Yet every lead seemed to disappear into nothing. And as days turned into weeks, the mystery only deepened. Because despite all efforts, nobody could explain what happened to Brian Shaffer after he entered the Ugly Tuna Saloona. And that was only the beginning. As investigators searched for answers, they quickly realized this was not going to be a normal missing person case. Most disappearances leave something behind. A witness, a clue, a financial transaction, a phone call, a mistake. But Brian's case seemed different. Every path investigators followed appeared to end in darkness. Police began by examining Brian's personal life. They wanted to know everything. His relationships, his finances, his mental state, his recent activities. Anything that might explain why a successful medical student suddenly vanished. The investigation revealed that Brian was carrying the emotional weight of his mother's recent death. The loss had affected him deeply. Anyone would struggle after losing a parent, but investigators found no evidence that Brian was suicidal. No note. No alarming conversations. No preparations suggesting he planned to end his life. Friends consistently described him as optimistic. Even during difficult times, many of them acknowledged that he was grieving. But grieving and disappearing are not the same thing. As detectives continued interviewing people, they focused on everyone who had been with Brian that night. His friends cooperated. The women he spoke with cooperated. Employees cooperated. Yet nobody provided the breakthrough investigators desperately needed. Everyone seemed to agree on one thing. Brian appeared normal. Nothing about his behavior suggested he was about to vanish forever. Meanwhile, public interest in the case continued growing. News stations covered the story. Newspapers published updates. People across Ohio became fascinated by the mystery, because unlike many missing person cases, this one came with a puzzle. A puzzle everyone could understand. A man entered a building. The cameras proved it. Yet nobody could prove he ever left. The question became an obsession. How? How could that happen? Investigators returned to the building again and again. They studied blueprints, examined service corridors, checked emergency exits, reviewed construction layouts. Every possible route was considered. Eventually, detectives confirmed that there were ways Brian could have left without appearing on the main surveillance footage. Construction work in parts of the complex created blind spots. Service exits existed. Employee-only routes existed. Theoretically, Brian could have slipped through one of them. But theory is not evidence. Even if Brian left through a hidden route. Another question remained. Where did he go next? No witness reported seeing him outside. No camera captured him walking away. No driver remembered picking him up. No evidence showed what happened after that point. The hidden exit theory explained how he might have avoided the cameras. It did not explain how he vanished from the entire city. Weeks passed. Then months. Search efforts expanded. Volunteers joined. Flyers appeared across neighborhoods. Investigators followed tips from the public. Some leads seemed promising. Most led nowhere. Then something strange happened. One of the most mysterious moments in the entire case. Brian's cell phone suddenly appeared to come back to life. For months, family members had continued calling his number. Usually, the calls went directly to voicemail. Then one day, the phone rang. Not once, but multiple times. The reaction was immediate. Hope exploded. For Brian's father, it felt like a miracle. For investigators, it felt like a possible breakthrough. Could Brian still be alive? Had he turned on his phone? Was he trying to contact someone? Me. People waited for answers. Unfortunately, none came. The calls were never answered. Investigators examined the situation carefully. Me. Telecommunications experts suggested there were technical explanations. Cellular networks occasionally produce unusual signals. A ringing phone does not necessarily mean the phone is active. Me. But for Brian's loved ones, those brief moments created a painful possibility. What if he was still out there? What if he was alive somewhere? What if he wanted to call home, but couldn't? The mystery only grew deeper. As years passed, multiple theories emerged. Each theory attempted to explain the impossible. The first theory was voluntary disappearance. According to this idea, Brian intentionally vanished. Perhaps he wanted a fresh start. Perhaps the stress of medical school overwhelmed him. Perhaps the loss of his mother pushed him toward a completely new life. Supporters of this theory pointed to one fact. Adults sometimes disappear voluntarily. It happens. People walk away from their old lives. They start over. They reinvent themselves. At first glance, the theory sounded reasonable, but investigators discovered major problems. Brian left behind nearly everything: his family, his friends, his education, his career opportunities, his bank accounts, his future. There was no evidence he prepared for a new identity. No evidence he withdrew large amounts of money. No evidence he secretly planned an escape. And perhaps most importantly, nobody who knew Brian believed he would willingly abandon the people he loved. The voluntary disappearance theory remained possible, but many investigators considered it unlikely. Another theory suggested foul play. This theory argued that Brian left through an unmonitored exit and encountered danger. Perhaps he crossed paths with the wrong person. Perhaps he became the victim of a robbery. Perhaps an argument escalated into violence. Perhaps someone lured him somewhere. This explanation had one major advantage. It acknowledged the reality that people sometimes become victims of crime, but it also suffered from a serious problem. Evidence. There wasn't any. No crime scene. No blood. No weapon. No witness. No suspect. Nothing directly connected anyone to Brian's disappearance. Without evidence, investigators struggled to move forward. Another theory suggested an accidental death. Supporters of this idea believed Brian may have fallen into an area that was difficult to access or discover. Construction zones existed near the complex. Hidden spaces existed. Perhaps his body was somehow overlooked. Police explored these possibilities. Searches were conducted. Areas were examined. Yet no trace of Brian was ever found. Years continued passing. The mystery refused to fade. Television programs began featuring the case. True, crime documentaries discussed it. Internet forums exploded with theories. Thousands of amateur investigators studied every available detail. Every photograph. Every witness statement. Every second of surveillance footage. Some people became convinced they had solved the mystery. Others believed the truth was still hidden. One theory attracted particular attention. It involved Brian's friend Clint Florence, not because investigators considered him guilty, but because internet speculation often focuses on those closest to a case. Clint cooperated with police. He answered questions. He took polygraph examinations. Investigators never charged him with any crime. Yet public speculation continued for years. The problem with famous mysteries is that people desperately want answers. And when answers do not exist, theories multiply. Some theories become elaborate. Others become bizarre. Over time, speculation expanded far beyond the available evidence. Certain people claimed Brian escaped to another country. Others believed he secretly started a new life. Some even suggested organized criminal involvement. Yet none of those ideas produced proof. The mystery remained exactly where it began. Without answers, without certainty, without closure, Perhaps the most heartbreaking aspect of the case involved Brian's father. For years, he searched for answers. For years, he hoped his son would return. Like many families of missing persons, he lived between hope and grief, unable to move forward completely, unable to stop searching. Then tragedy struck again. Brian's father was killed in a storm accident years after the disappearance. He died without ever learning what happened to his son. For many people following the case, it was a devastating reminder of how disappearances affect entire families. One missing person creates countless victims. Parents, siblings, friends, loved ones, all trapped in uncertainty. All waiting for answers that may never come. Today, nearly 2 decades later, Brian Shaffer's disappearance remains unsolved. His case continues to appear in documentaries, articles, podcasts, and true crime discussions around the world. Because despite years of investigation, one fact remains unchanged. No one knows what happened after Brian entered that bar. Somewhere between those flashing lights and the early morning hours. The trail ended, and every attempt to continue it has failed. Yet perhaps the strangest part of the story is this. If Brian was murdered, where is the evidence? If he started a new life, where is the proof? If he suffered an accident, why has nothing been found? Every explanation seems incomplete. Every answer creates new questions. And that is why this mystery continues to haunt investigators even today. Because sometimes a case remains unsolved, not because detectives stop looking, but because the truth leaves without a trace. And in the case of Brian Shaffer, the truth may still be hiding somewhere in the darkness, waiting to be discovered. As the years passed, investigators found themselves facing the same problem again and again. Every theory seemed possible, yet none of them explained everything. Every explanation solved one part of the mystery while creating another, and that is exactly why the disappearance of Brian Shaffer remains so fascinating. Because unlike many unsolved cases, there is no single theory that clearly rises above the others, only questions and more questions. Let's start with the theory many investigators consider the most realistic: the hidden exit theory. According to this explanation, Brian simply left through an area not properly covered by surveillance cameras. At first, this sounds reasonable. The building contained construction zones, service corridors, employee exits, blind spots. Police confirmed that avoiding the cameras was possible. The problem comes afterward. Imagine Brian successfully leaves the building unseen. What happens next? He still has to walk somewhere, meet someone, get into a vehicle, or continue through the city. Yet no witness reliably reported seeing him. No nearby camera captured him. No physical evidence placed him anywhere. It's almost as if the mystery begins the exact moment he exits the building. For some investigators, that suggests whatever happened occurred very shortly afterward. Perhaps within minutes, perhaps even seconds. Then there is the foul play theory. The theory many people find most convincing. According to this scenario, Brian leaves the building through an unmonitored route and encounters danger. Maybe he crosses paths with someone violent. Maybe he witnesses something he shouldn't. Maybe a robbery goes wrong. Maybe an argument escalates unexpectedly. After all, crimes can happen quickly. A single decision, a single wrong turn, a single encounter, and a life changes forever. Supporters of this theory argue that it explains why Brian never contacted anyone again. It explains why no financial activity occurred. It explains why his future plans suddenly ended. But once again, evidence becomes the obstacle. Investigators never found a crime scene. No suspects emerged. No physical proof connected anyone to Brian's disappearance. And without evidence, the theory remains exactly that: a theory. Then there is perhaps the most controversial explanation. The idea that Brian intentionally disappeared. Many people reject this possibility immediately, me. Others believe it deserves serious consideration. The argument is simple. Brian was under enormous emotional pressure. Medical school, family tragedy, personal stress, the death of his mother. Perhaps he reached a breaking point. Perhaps he decided to walk away from everything. Start over. Become someone else. Disappear on purpose. History contains examples of people doing exactly that. Some vanish for years. Others vanish forever. The problem is that Brian left behind no preparation. No hidden money. No documented plans. No confirmed sightings. No evidence of a secret life. Starting over sounds easy in movies. In reality, it requires resources, planning, and luck. A tremendous amount of luck. The longer Brian remained missing, the more difficult the voluntary disappearance theory became to accept, because maintaining a completely hidden existence for nearly 20 years is extraordinarily difficult, especially in a world filled with cameras, digital records, and online communication. Then there are the theories that sound almost unbelievable. Theories born from frustration. Theories born because people desperately want answers. Some claim Brian somehow remained inside the building and suffered an accident that was never discovered. Others believe corruption covered up what happened. Some speculate about criminal organizations. Others imagine elaborate conspiracies. But extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And in Brian's case, evidence remains painfully scarce. That scarcity is what keeps the mystery alive. No theory wins. No theory loses. Everything remains suspended in uncertainty. Over the years, countless investigators have revisited the surveillance footage. People have studied every frame, every movement, every shadow, every individual entering and leaving the building. Some viewers claim they spotted Brian. Others disagree. Experts disagree. Amateurs disagree. Everyone sees something different. Yet despite thousands of hours of analysis, no breakthrough has emerged. No hidden clue suddenly solved the mystery. No overlooked detail changed everything. The footage remains exactly what it has always been. A record of a man entering a building, and a mystery beginning. The emotional impact on Brian's loved ones cannot be overstated. For families of missing persons, there is no clear ending, no funeral, no certainty, no final answer. Instead, they live in a painful space between hope and grief. Every phone call becomes a possibility. Every unknown face becomes a possibility. Every tip becomes a possibility. Most people experience loss through certainty. Families of missing persons experience loss through uncertainty. And uncertainty can last forever, Imagine waking up every morning wondering whether someone you love is alive. Imagine spending years waiting for a phone call. Years hoping for news. Years searching for answers. That was the reality faced by Brian's family, and it remains the reality for countless families around the world. One reason this case continues attracting attention is because people see themselves in it. Brian wasn't a celebrity. He wasn't a criminal. He wasn't someone living a dangerous lifestyle. He was a student, a son, a friend, an ordinary person, and perhaps that makes the mystery even more frightening. Because if someone like Brian can vanish without explanation, what does that say about the world around us? Sometimes the most terrifying mysteries are not the ones involving monsters or legends. Sometimes the most terrifying mysteries involve ordinary people living ordinary lives. People who simply disappear. Without warning, without explanation, without answers. Today, nearly 2 decades after that night in Columbus, Ohio, investigators still list Brian Shaffer as a missing person. His photograph continues appearing on missing person websites. His case continues generating discussion. And somewhere out there, perhaps the truth still exists. Maybe someone knows something. Maybe someone saw something and never realized its importance. Maybe a single detail remains hidden, waiting to connect all the pieces together. Many cold cases are solved years later, sometimes decades later. A forgotten witness comes forward. New technology reveals hidden evidence. Old secrets finally surface. Could that happen here? Perhaps. But until that day arrives, the mystery remains unsolved. And that brings us back to the question that has haunted this case from the beginning. What happened to Brian Shaffer? Did he leave through a hidden exit? Did he encounter someone dangerous? Did he choose to disappear? Did an accident occur? Or is the truth something nobody has considered? The honest answer is surprisingly simple. We don't know. After all the investigations, after all the documentaries, after all the theories, the most truthful answer remains the same. Nobody knows. And maybe that uncertainty is exactly why this story continues to captivate people around the world. Human beings crave answers. We want endings. We want explanations. We want mysteries to make sense. But some mysteries refuse to cooperate. Some mysteries remain unfinished. The disappearance of Brian Shaffer is one of those mysteries. A man walks into a crowded bar. Friends see him. Cameras record him. Witnesses speak with him. Everything appears normal. Then suddenly, nothing. No confirmed sightings. No explanation. No answers. Just silence. A silence that has lasted for years. A silence that continues even today. Perhaps one day that silence will finally be broken. Perhaps someone watching this video knows a detail that investigators missed. Perhaps the truth is still waiting to be discovered. Or perhaps Brian Shaffer will remain one of America's greatest unsolved disappearances forever. Until then, the mystery remains open. A puzzle without a solution. A story without an ending. And a reminder that sometimes the most frightening thing in the world is not what we know, but what we never will. This has been one of the most baffling mysteries ever featured on the Midnight Archive. If you enjoyed this investigation, don't forget to subscribe and join us for more dark mysteries, unexplained disappearances, and chilling true stories. Because somewhere out there, another mystery is waiting, and we'll be there to uncover it. Until next time, stay curious, and stay in the shadows.